Ladies and gentlemen, our next activity, of course, is our up-close interview. And this morning, we have Dr. Keith Brandt scheduled. He is an aerospace medicine physician with subspecialties in preventative medicine and public health for over 20 and with over 20 years experience.
Okay.
He lives in Alvin with his wife, Melinda, who is our music instructor that we have on Thursdays. And of course, the 6 cats in the house that you heard about and their son. And he is employed by NASA currently.
Let's get closer.
So that's such an interesting backdrop that you have.
I thought it'd be appropriate for today.
Thank you, thank you. So what is aerospace medicine?
Aerospace medicine is taking care of people, often hyper healthy people, very healthy people that are going into abnormal environments, such as either the flight environment or space environment.
I see. And is an aerospace medicine physician the same as a flight surgeon?
Well, a flight surgeon does do aerospace medicine. However, not all flight surgeons go on and do the residency training that I've done.
Okay, so your residency training, where was that?
Did it in San Antonio through the United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine. That was done in my original was 1991, and I did for the basic flight surgeon training. It was a 6-week course, and then I did the full 3-year residency from 97 to 2000.
Wow.
Interesting. Is that out at Brooks Air Force Base?
It was at the time. Since then, it has moved up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and that was part of my Air Force duties, was moving that schoolhouse up to Wright-Patterson and setting up the new flight surgeon training course in that new location.
I see. You said that you went through your training through the Air Force program for flight surgeons then. Did you attend the military medical school?
No, I did all my training civilian side from my initial training. I did my medical school at Indiana University School of Medicine. And while I was there, the National Guard had a program to bring medical students into the Guard. Now, what they didn't tell me is that the National Guard is really part of the Army. So as soon as I figured that out, I switched to the Air National Guard and immediately went to the flight surgeon training as soon as I joined there.
I see. Okay, so you started out through National Guard then rather than through regular Air Force. I'm a military brat.
Okay.
So I grew up around the military dispensaries, and most of the doctors were trained through the military because they were able to get their doctorate without student loans. Of course, they had to stay many years to pay off that time, but not only did they get the experience, they got the MD without the big student loan bill. So I assume that everyone who goes through the flight surgeon program probably went through the military school. So you're the exception there. How did you first become? Go ahead. How did you first become interested in aerospace medicine?
It seemed kind of a logical thing to me. I grew up out in the country with a fairly poor family without a lot of books around the house. And one of our major sources of books were my dad's World War II flight manuals. So I spent a lot of time reading through those. My mom was not real happy about the flight environment, so I really didn't do a flight training early on, but I learned a lot about it then. And this was a good way for me to get into that flight world.
Was your father a pilot?
Yeah, he was a pilot in World War II. He was a flight instructor through the majority of the war, but wound up on B-29s at the very end.
Oh, wow. Interesting background. Very interesting background. Are there any employers in your field other than NASA?
Well, the biggest one would be the military. That's by far where most of the flight surgeons and aerospace medicine specialists wind up. Other than that, it's largely government, not just NASA. The FAA also has a large number of aerospace medicine specialists in it. On the civilian side, it's more the aviation medical examiners, which are have some basic training in the flight environment, and the FAA's rules and regulations for their pilots. So there's a lot of those, but they're not, for the most part, very few of those are full-time jobs.
But in the military, it is a full-time job then. What
Absolutely.
what do they do? I know they have the regular doctors, but what do the flight surgeons do for the military?
Yeah, in flight medicine, we're a primary care for the most part. We're doing the day-to-day care of the people that are in the flight environment, but we're also doing the annual physicals and applying the military medical standards to those individuals. We also are in the ones that go out on most of the deployments. And if there's a crew that's going out to a very austere location, it's going to be the flight surgeons that are going to go along with them. So
I
a
see.
lot of deployment medicine, wilderness medicine, public health. We work with our public health officers to do the food evaluations at the different restaurants, and if we're deployed, make sure the food's healthy, make sure the sanitation's going good. So just a very broad base of things that we can do.
Very, very broad indeed. I'm surprised there's so many subtopics under the aerospace medicine field. Can you tell us about changes that have come about at NASA since the start of this pandemic, especially what's been done to slow the spread and to treat the employees that have already tested positive?
That's not really been much that I've been involved with directly. However, JSC has gone to almost completely teleworking now, unless there are just things that you have to do to be in there. And even in the physician roles, most of us are teleworking because the job that we do is not necessarily hands-on medicine. It's not one-to-one with patients. It's more working with a population base. However, we do have some times where we are one-on-one, like when we're working with a crew. So JSC has gone to mostly telework, very, very few people working on site right now. I've had to go in quite a bit to work in mission control because I just got done working a couple of minutes. And that's certainly been a challenge. The biggest challenge I've been involved with is how do we keep our crew members from getting infected before they go up? The last thing you want is to get this virus up on the space station where there's very limited capability for medical care. And also when they come back down, they've got their immune systems don't work quite as well as they did before they went up. So we've got to protect them pretty closely, at least for that first couple of weeks after they get back. So that has changed our operations greatly on how we especially move people back and forth internationally.
So almost everyone is working remotely. And
Yeah.
then crews that are preparing for missions, I guess, are strictly quarantined for a period of time.
We have a lot stricter contact rules with them as far as masking and hand cleaning and sanitation and how many people can be around them. So we're keeping them a lot more isolated, even though they do have to go in and do hands-on work.
And I understand the shuttle is a sterile environment also. Is that
Now, the
correct?
shuttle was retired several years ago, but the ISS, we try to keep it as clear as we can. I mean, we screen people before they go in. We keep them in very strict isolation for the 2 weeks prior to their launch, 2 to 3 weeks. The Russians are actually a little bit more strict on that as far as separating the crew out into a specific hotel in Kazakhstan where they're very isolated from the population. We have a similar thing here now. We're launching from the U.S. We've got a crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center that we can keep people in for the couple weeks before launch. So yeah, we greatly restrict access, even in normal times. I mean, we don't need a cold or just even the minor things on somebody that's up in space and trying to adjust to that environment.
You said that you work with the crews prior to them going up into space. Do you work with the astronauts after they return also?
When you're assigned to a mission, you're assigned to a crew, and you work with them before the mission, during the mission, and after the mission. So you are their doctor for that whole time period that they're working the mission, and that includes their training beforehand and their recovery afterwards.
Are you the one responsible for their pre-flight physicals?
Yes, absolutely.
I imagine that's a very stressful part of your job because you know these people spend their life wanting this desire to go into space. and they train and they go to school and they center so much. And then the slightest little thing, high blood pressure, I understand, uh, all kinds of little things can kick them out. Do you have to make that decision by yourself, or do you have a team to assess the physicals?
Well, fortunately, it's not just a one-shot deal. We're monitoring crew health from the time that they come in as an astronaut candidate through their training period, through their certification period. As soon as they're assigned for mission, they have health screenings that go on all the way through. So it's not just a one-time make or break thing. Most of the problems we can fix. As long as we know about it, we can fix it, take care of it through medication, surgeries, whatever they need, and get them back to flying. A flight surgeon's motto is keep them flying. It's not what you'll see reading right stuff where we're trying to keep them down. It's just the opposite. We are going to fight tooth and nail to get them up on that mission if it's safe for them to do so.
I see, I see. So are you the only doctor doing this out at NASA now?
We have about 30 positions at NASA in various roles, and not everybody's doing the front line
Well, I got 2 pages
missions, or
there.
people rotate in and do missions. So it's really hard to nail down the exact number. But we have a very big team. And when we do have a medical issue, we bring it up to what we call the aeromedical board and bring in whatever specialists we need from the outside. And we frequently pull in the nation or the world's top specialist in any one area if we need to.
Excellent, excellent. I've heard that the zero gravity environment has a detrimental effect on bone density. Is this true, first off? And is there a way flight crews can do weight-bearing exercise while they're on their trips?
Microgravity pretty much affects all the body, all the organ systems. So if you would just go into microgravity and just float there and do nothing, it's like being in prolonged bed rest. So you lose your bone mass, you lose muscle mass, you lose your cardiovascular conditioning, and in space that you don't get on the bed rest studies is you also lose your vestibular system. It recalibrates how it looks at things. So
Wow.
we do have countermeasures for pretty much all of those. We have what's called the ARED, the Advanced Resistive X-ray Exercise Device, that can simulate weightlifting and a lot of the things that you do on the ground, like push-ups, sit-ups. If you consider it just walking around the ground, you're supporting your body weight. They're not even doing that in space.
Yes.
So we can have them bench pressing, 400 or 500 pounds, and it seems like a lot here on Earth, but it's not as much in space because we're offsetting the we're also doing our body weight here on the Earth. So
I'd like
they have resistive exercise they can do. We have a bicycle and we have a treadmill that they can strap into. So straps hold them down to it to give them running, to give them the impact that you need for the bone health.
Oh, interesting. So those are actually, there's a bicycle and a treadmill that they can get on. One of our students was asking, what is a vestibular medicine?
Vestibular is your sense of balance.
Okay, just balance. And of course, you've got those little bones in your ear that are responsible for your balance. And in a weightless environment, I guess the fluids cannot balance. Is that what happens, Dr. Brandt?
Well, there's no gravity pulling on it. So if I tilt my head sideways, there's a little bone inside your ear that's going to move with gravity. Well, in space, you tilt your head and that doesn't happen. There's no gravity to pull it. So some of your sensory inputs that you're used to on the ground because of the way the gravity works don't work in space because there's no gravity. If you're standing straight up, if you're upside down, it doesn't matter. Your body feels the same. And if you float from one module to the other and somebody else is upside down and you look at them, it can be like, what is going on, until you're used to that environment.
So is dizziness a problem then?
Yes, absolutely.
And
And
what,
it's on the transitions. It's when you go into space and then when you come back into the gravity well.
I see. Have you been involved with the physicals on anyone who has returned from the space station after a long period of time?
Yeah, I've worked 3 different missions directly as a crew surgeon for the crews on the International Space Station.
Were the astronauts permanently affected by the weightless environment, or are those temporary?
It's temporary for everybody. How long it lasts is variable. Usually most people are pretty comfortable back on Earth after about 3 days, and same going into space. After about 3 days, they're going to be adapted to the environment. We let them drive after about 2 weeks time just to make sure they're back into it and not having any of the weird vestibular illusions that they get when they get back. You don't want that happening while you're driving.
Interesting. Is that the same as space sickness?
There
Or
is, anytime you change gravities, you're going to get some yeah, so there's we call it space motion sickness, even though it's not exactly the same as motion sickness here on the ground, but it feels like it. Some people are very sick when they get up there, others barely even notice it, but probably at least 70% of the people who go up have it to the point where it affects them somewhat.
interesting, interesting.
Almost everybody has some symptoms.
Now, I understand that the weightless environment can have a detrimental effect on the heart muscle also. And are you telling us today that that would be a temporary problem?
Yeah, well, it's the lack of any kind of exercise, and not just exercise as in going running and get your heart rate up, but even just walking around, you're changing how you move in gravity. So when you stand up, if you stand up too fast, even on the ground, you might get lightheaded until your body reacts to it. Well, that doesn't happen in space. You change position in space, it doesn't change your heart. So that reflex that the heart does when you stand up of compressing your veins in your legs, pumping a little harder, changing your blood pressure so your head's getting adequate blood pressure, that doesn't happen in space. So that reflex kind of goes away in space, and it can take a little bit for it to come down. We got to be real careful with especially standing them up after they get back from their missions if we didn't do any training. Now, the treadmill and the bicycle get their heart rates up. So we get some of that, at least keeping the heart exercised and moving with the exercises we do. So we have countermeasures for that. However, that reflex of just the gravity pulling the blood down, we don't have any way to do that, simulate that in space. So yeah, we've got to watch out when they come back down, that reflex gets reestablished.
That's interesting. I never knew that you physically have to stand your people back up when they come back. Do they lose the ability temporarily to stand on their own when they return to a weighted
Not if they've been doing
environment?
their exercises and keeping up with it. They're usually pretty good with that because their muscle strength is good. Their balance is going to be off. When they first get back, especially for the first few hours, if they stand up, we're gonna be right there with them to make sure they don't fall down.
Very good, very good. Would you tell us about the training that the astronauts go through before they go on a mission?
Well, there's about 2 years of just baseline astronaut training when they first come on. They're considered astronaut candidates until they finish that first couple of years of just general training. When they're assigned to a mission, their training starts typically about a year out for mission specific. And it's very intensive on all the systems on the vehicle that they're flying up on the International Space Station itself. If they have to go out and do a spacewalk, they have hours and hours of training for that in our big pool that we've got up by Ellington Field, the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and just any specific experiments that they're working on that are going to be flown during their mission, they have to have training on that. So it is a very busy time for that year prior to the flight. And the way things have been happening recently is we haven't been getting people assigned to the flights that early. So they've really had to compress their training flow and work very hard to get ready for that mission.
Yes, I know they've gone through extensive technical training, but is there special physical training that they do in addition to the technical?
They're not specifically tested on physical training, but most of these guys coming in anymore are baseline athletes.
That's right.
They maintain it on their own pretty much. They do have, we do check their VO2 max, which is a measure of how much oxygen they can burn while they're running or while they're exercising. And they do have a minimum level they have to meet on that. It's not super high. It's not like elite athlete level, but most of our guys test at the elite athlete level.
That's what I've noticed with a few that I've met just by living this close by, that they are super athletes and super nerds and absolutely love what they do. It's the dream job for so many out there. Did you ever think that you would work for NASA when you were starting out?
It was always kind of a dream, and I've been a space nut since I was a young kid growing up watching the Apollo missions. So didn't know if it'd be possible, but that was certainly one of the thoughts in the back of my mind going into the aerospace medicine residency. But that'd be my foot in the door for doing this job.
Excellent. Do you remember when man landed on the moon?
Oh, absolutely.
And how old? Well, I don't want to ask you how old you were, but did that make a lasting impression on you? Were you glued to the television?
Yeah, I got to stay up late to watch it on TV on my little black and white TV that we had. Of course, most of the original pictures were black and white anyway. So
That's right. We got
yeah,
our
it
first
was
color.
definitely a highlight of my life when days I remember well.
Yes, yes, made a lasting impression on all of us who are listening today. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us today and that you made time in your very, very busy schedule. I understand that you are working from home now because of the pandemic specifically.
Yeah,
And I was
most of the things we do are meeting support. Since I'm done with working the missions right now, I don't have as much hands-on. So it's mainly supporting our upcoming lunar missions. We're getting ready to launch in a couple of years. So I'm working on some of the vehicles and the procedures and the medical kits and things we'll need for the next phase of our exploration.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing about that in the future. And thank you so much for joining us today and being our guest on CompU Zoom, which is our virtual classes for those who are having some memory impairments and are shut in because of the pandemic. So we're very grateful that people have been able to come and join us via computer, so we don't feel so isolated in the world. So again, thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Dr. Brandt a hand. Good job. Good job.